let's make a deal. First, I'm going to share with you my top favorite gambits and traps to use against the French defense. And in return, you guys are going to watch this video up to the end. You are also going to subscribe if you haven't already, and you are also going to give this video a thumbs up. Oh, don't forget to share this. Before we dive in, see, the main problem with the French defense is it makes our e4 opening repertoire look useless and boring. To be honest, I don't know about you, but when I play the King's Pawn game, I just expect to have a quick and fun open game with hopes of transposing to the Italian game, or the Bishop's opening, the Scotch Gambit, maybe the Evans Gambit, and other open games alike. But this move pawn to e6 kinda disturbs the whole e4 plan, in that we won't be able to take advantage of the weak f7 pawn. I should mention to say, French players love playing closed games in the opening stage, and this is the whole purpose of the French. And to be honest, it's just boring. So what I'm going to do in this video is to show you some best alternatives that you can use against the French. And in all of these gambits and traps, you will notice one thing. Our main goal will be to open up the French position, thus taking our French opponents out of their comfort zone. Gambit number 1 to use against the French defense as an alternative. In the elbow gambit, to be honest, the following line that I'm about to show you doesn't have a name. This is just a gambit that I was trying to develop, beginning with e4, then e6. We first of all want to completely avoid the typical French defense opening move order such as pawn to c5, bishop c5, and bishop b4 check. So instead of playing pawn to d4 right away, you go pawn to c3. And as always, French players will always play pawn to d5 on move 2, after which you go d4, so you're gambiting a pawn on e4. Wait a second, this is different from the Alpine Gambit, where we first of all develop the dark squared bishop before playing pawn to c3, and you'll see the difference. So we temporarily sacrifice a pawn for quick development, and we don't care about our pawns as long as we have massive piece activity. After d takes e4, you simply go queen c2, queen d5 by black will be a misplacement of the queen and a sheer waste of time. So they play knight to f6, that's the top played move. And now you go knight d2, if pawn to c5, because that's what French players play, you simply take back your pawn first. After c takes d4, taking back on d4 is not part of our vocabulary in this gambit. So you just go ahead and play knight takes f6 check, they will take back with their queen, and then you go knight f3, sacrificing the second pawn, after which you go bishop g5, almost trapping the queen. If queen g6 by black, you go bishop d3. You can still call this the elbow gambit. Black can't take our b2 pawn because of queen takes c8, which will be checkmate. If queen h5, you simply castle long, and there's a trick in this line where black can even lose immediately after pawn to h6. Yeah, the best move is bishop b4 check, because you have intentions of sacrificing your rook and knight takes, then you take back, exposing the king, and start involving your other pieces. Yeah, but a more straightforward way is to simply go bishop g6, trying to win black's queen on h5. If queen takes g6, whoops, that'll be mate in one. If they don't take with their queen, let's say f takes g6, you still go rook d8 check, and after king f7, you have pawn to g4 wanting to trap black's queen. If queen takes g4, you go knight e5 check, and they will lose their queen. If black takes your bishop with check, you simply take back with the knight, and after hg, this is just clearly winning for white. Black's pieces are paralyzed at the back. You can see how bad that is. Let's move on. Gambit number 2. The Alpine Gambit occurs in the French defense after e4 and pawn to e6, and then after pawn to d4 and d5, you don't take or advance, you don't even play knight c3, but rather go bishop e3, sacrificing the e pawn. For what? Well, for quick development and a more active game. Can you play this in classical chess or in serious OTB tournaments? Hell yeah! Masters have tried this opening with much success. You can see in the Masters database, white players win about 30% and black players win about 30% as well. And there's a higher chance for your game to end in a draw. As you can see, this is the Masters database, by the way. So this is a very decent opening to play against the French if you want to avoid the French or if you just want to have fun. What about in the Lichess database? 53% win rate for white. Come on, you guys. The Alpine Gambit is the real deal. And I'm not going to repeat content because I have a full video on this Gambit. a quick revision. If pawn takes, the idea is to go knight d2. So we start developing all our minor pieces in a way of attacking this e4 pawn. If knight f6, for example, we go pawn to c3, wanting to put our queen on c2. If pawn to b6, we go pawn to g3. If bishop b7, we go bishop g2. So you can see all we are doing is developing our pieces in a way of targeting this misplaced pawn. So after bishop e7, we go queen c2. For example, after castle shot, you can just go ahead and take on e4. After knight takes, you go bishop takes, and after bishop takes, you go queen takes. And now the game is completely equal. Plus, you are attacking this poor rook if black doesn't do a thing about that. But you see, after playing bishop e3, and then black takes, and then you play knight d2, some of your opponents will try to hold on to their e4 pawn. But the move to always remember on move number 5 is pawn to f3. In fact, there is nothing to memorize here if you think about it. This is called the minority attack in chess. For example, pawn to f3 kind of forces e takes. And now you see these weaknesses that I'm talking about. Yes, you are down a pawn, but you are way ahead in development. And according to Stockfish, this is very much equal. White has a slight advantage. Open to. If knight f6 is played, you just continue putting your pieces on their potential squares. If bishop d6, you can even go queen e2. Maybe you want to play bishop g5 and then win back your pawn. If they castle short, which is the top played move, the good part of the Alpine Gambit is you can also castle long and then start attacking on the side of the board where you have a few number of pawns. Again, launching the minority attack. But before we proceed, I have some bad news for you guys. This will probably be your last time to hear my voice ever again, if you haven't yet subscribed to this channel, because that's just how the YouTube algorithm works. So be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Let's go. Gambit number 3, to use against the French defense as an alternative in the Monte Carlo variation of the French defense exchange variation that begins with e4. Then black plays e6, d4, d5, and now you don't advance your e-pawn, but instead you take on d5 first, and black usually takes back with the pawn. If you continue with knight to f3, this will be a normal exchange variation, but you can try this different move, pawn to c4, which is the Monte Carlo variation. As you can see in the Lichess database, knight to f6 is by far the top played move, after which you now go knight to c3. From here, you are only going to be seeing the top played moves only. For example, bishop b4, which looks more logical. And now this is when you develop knight to f3. Again, castle short by black. Then you go bishop d3, and you can see rook e8 check is what everybody plays, where you block the check with your bishop, not with your elbow. Knight g4 is what everybody plays, after which you just castle short. They'll be happy to take your bishop because after capturing your free pawn on e3, black will think they just took your pawn for nothing, but this is very dangerous because you have knight takes d5, a very hidden move, which comes with a fork, by the way. Black cannot save the bishop without giving up the rook. Then you take, let's say bishop f8 or bishop d6, it doesn't matter. You're already up an exchange. Once the dust settles, you now start putting all your pieces on the most active squares. That's how we play chess. If pawn to f6, you can retreat your knight, take on f6, or even better, sack your knight. Because you know it's not about material, it's about piece activity. For example, if knight c6, your plan is just to simply take on f6 with check. Black's pawn on g7 is pinned to the king, so they'll be forced to give up their queen or probably play king e8, which will lead to mate in 3, like this. So again, remember this is the Monte Carlo variation of the French defense that arises from the exchange variation. Gambit number 4, in the French defense knight variation, this is why you begin with e4, then e6, then instead of d4 or pawn to c3, you play knight to f3, which is the knight variation. Black will still play d5, expecting you to go knight c3, which is the two knights attack, by the way, but you simply want to go pawn to d3, allowing black to take on e4 so that you can go knight g5, counter-attacking the pawn on e4. If e takes d3, the top played move, now you go bishop takes d3. You want to play this like the tennis on Gambit, but after pawn to h6, you simply go queen h5, because black cannot take your knight. You're going to take their rook on h8. Now see, there are 4 common responses in this position, all of which are not good enough. For example, the third common move in this position in the Lichess database is knight to f6. but that allows mate in 1, and I don't know why this happens. But anyway, instead of knight to f6, your opponents might try pawn to g6. But this is when you can shock your opponents by simply sacrificing your bishop on g6, and after pawn takes, you have queen takes g6. Look at this. The top played move in this position is king d7, which is a losing mistake because of queen takes e6. Checkmate. So far we've looked at knight to f6 and pawn to g6, but what if black plays queen f6? Well, same story, same mistake, we just go knight takes f7, threatening to capture the free rook on h8 next. If queen takes f7, the top played move, you just play bishop g6, pinning the queen to the king, game over. If black plays king e7 instead of queen takes f7, let's say this, well, you simply take the poor rook, or let's say after knight c6 you go cast short, putting your king to safety first, and on the next move you're going to play knight g6 check and win the dark squad bishop. If they don't play pawn to h6, well, you have to go queen h5 immediately, and let's say they play knight to f6 in this position, well, we plan to leave our knight on g5 just like that for the rest of the game. For example, knight c3, if bishop e7, we have queen e2, castle short, we want to castle long in this line. So bishop e3 is the move to consider. If h6, this is what I meant by leaving our knight on g5 for the rest of the game. If hg, we can simply take back, and this is clearly winning for white. You start with rook h8 check, king takes rook, then you go queen h5 check, and on the next move you mate on h7. But again, it's not every time you're going to see black taking on g5 with h takes g5. Sometimes they play knight c6, so you just leave that knight on g5 for the rest of the game. You continue playing your moves, castle long, so they'll play something like queen e8, moving out of danger, pawn to g4. You just continue developing as if your knight is not under attack. If pawn to e5, you go pawn to f3. Because of this, if black takes, you can take and you have this once again, or the same tactic where you first of all give a check on h8, and after king takes, you go queen h2 check, which is going to be mate in 1. Gambit number 5, to use against the French defense as an alternative. Let's just call this a rare gambit. We'll find out its name as we proceed. Black is well prepared with his theory after the move pawn to d5. I hate this. So what I want you guys to be doing is to confuse your enemy's eyeballs by playing something else. Knight to f3, which I recommend in this video. And believe you me, you will still see your opponents playing pawn to d5. This is about the pawn to d3 line, which invites black to take on e4, after which you don't go knight g5, but knight e5. This will come as a surprise to most of your opponents, you guys. Trust me with all your eyeballs. And when you look at this position, e takes d3 is the top played move. But one may wonder if our knight on e5 is that safe. Just to clear out your thoughts, pawn to f6 for example doesn't work due to this common trick that you already know, you guys. Queen h5 check, and after pawn to g6, you take the pawn and next take the rook on h8, and that will force the black king to step up to e7, after which you're going to win the pawn. This will no longer be a gambit. Black is just down a full rook. Anyways, the top played move in this position is e takes d3, after which I do not recommend taking back on d3 with your bishop, but rather sacrificing another pawn on c2. What a different gambit that has no name at the time of this recording. Could this really be the knight variation? I don't think so. This should be Kaspar's gambit against the French defense. Anyways, the top played move in this position is of course d takes c2, which is a blunder because of queen takes d8, and after king takes the only move, you now play knight takes f7, double attacking the black king and the rook on h8. Let's say after king e8, you simply take that free rook, and after pawn to g6, you already know the idea. You simply go bishop d3, and on the next move, you don't take the pawn on c2. First of all, you damage black's pawn structure on the king side, give him a check after bishop takes g6, and after king f8, you go bishop takes c2. That's when you win that pawn. In this position, you are just a pawn up with equal number of pieces, but with a better position. Very good. Let's look at another line. Well, so we just saw how bad d takes c2 is, even though it is the top played move. But what if black plays the second most played move, knight to f6? Well, against this, I do not recommend to resign, but rather to take on d3 with your light squad bishop this time. This is a gambit, so the aim is rapid development and just to ensure that you develop your pieces on their most active squares. For example, after bishop d6, you simply go knight c4 because your knight was under attack, castle shot by black, you go bishop g5, you're just playing active chess here. h6, bishop h4 is not much of a stretch, but taking black's dark squared bishop is even better. If queen takes d6, you just take on f6 and mess up black's pawn structure on the king side. So black has to take on d6 with his c-pawn, allowing us to go bishop h4 this time. And in most of these lines, our main goal is to castle long and start attacking on the king side as early as we can, beginning with the move pawn to g4. So now you know the secret, you guys. For example, knight b7, queen e2, d5, castle long, and position according to Stockfish is equal. Anyways, gambit number 6. So after e4, e6, you can go d4. And the moment black plays d5, in case you didn't know, you can surprise your opponents by going c4. Now this is the dimmer dam gambit, interestingly, which can also arise from the queen's pawn game. It's like we started with d4 and black played d5. Then after c4, they play pawn to e6, which is the queen's gambit declined. And well, this is where you play pawn to e4 immediately, which transposes the game back into the French defense dimmer dam gambit, and it's up to black to either accept it or decline it. So here you're going to see your opponents taking on e4. Cause what else? Our ideas are very simple. We'll start developing all our pieces on the basis of this black's pawn on e4. For example, knight c3, pawn to g3, bishop g2, bishop e3, and queen c2, over attacking the e4 pawn, as if we want to capture it immediately, but no. So let's start with knight c6 first. Well, knight c6 is not a good move because of pawn to d5 attacking the knight, and if e takes d5, you simply take back with your pawn attacking the knight, and after black plays knight e5, well, here you have Kaspar's signature move, queen f4 check, which also wins the pawn on e4. Next, you are planning to play pawn to f4, which would completely trap the knight on e5, and that's why you're going to see most of your opponents playing queen e7, practically speaking. Well, after which I recommend you just develop a minor piece, bishop f4. The idea is that after knight g6, you simply exchange queens and win the pawn on c7. And you can see how crazy this gambit is. From being down a pawn, now you are up a pawn, which is why I wouldn't mind playing this, even in a rapid match. So back to our starting position, dimmer dam gambit accepted. Instead of knight c6 by black, you may see them playing bishop b4, just pinning your knight to the king and also stopping you from capturing the pawn on e4. So here I just recommend you go knight e2. Remember our plan. Next, you are threatening to play a3, chasing the dark squad bishop away. For example, after knight to f6, you simply go a3, so that if bishop takes, you take back with your knight, renewing the threat to capture the pawn on e4 in the long run. Let's say after knight c6, now your d4 pawn is attacked twice by two of black's pieces. You go d5, even though you can still go bishop e3 here and play g3, bishop g2. That's what you want to do. But hey, d5 is more forcing because if e takes d5, you have c takes d5 attacking the knight. And once again, if knight e5, you have queen d4. As simple as that. So black has to play knight e7, attacking your pawn on d5 3 times, after which you simply go bishop c4, defending your pawn 3 times. And so they are going to castle short. After which you do the same. Then bishop g4 by black, you go queen b3, attacking the b7 pawn and also eyeballing the g5 square. Let's say after b6, you go bishop g5. The idea is just to capture the knight on f6 and win back the pawn on e4. So you can clearly see that in most of these positions, you get back your pawn on e4 in one way or another. Gambit number 7. After e4, and say black plays e6, I still recommend you go c4. The most played move is d5. In this position, never should you take with your e pawn. At this point, you want to take with your c pawn first. And after pawn takes, you have an option to play the main line, which is ed. At this point, this is known as the Steiner variation. After queen f4 check, if black plays bishop d7, the whole idea is to play queen b3. See, what bishop d7 does is it blocks the vision of the black queen. So on the next move, you're going to target 2 pawns. And if black chooses to take the pawn on e4, you don't even take on b7 right away. First, you activate your light squad bishop. We're going to see this in the normal orthoschnap gambit. And this poses a threat on the f7 pawn, and that queen e7, you first of all start with queen takes b7, and after bishop c6, not allowing you to take that, you go queen c8 check. Queen d8 only move, bishop takes, king takes, you win the free queen. If king e7, that leads to checkmate. Also, black has an option to block the queen f4 check with their c pawn instead of playing bishop d7. If they do this, I recommend it to go pawn takes. But if you just want to play a quick gambit take, they would take like this, and then you develop your king's knight. The moment they play knight f6, this is when you develop your light squad bishop, knowing full and well that black can't play queen e6 check, they'll lose the queen, they can't play queen e5 check. In most cases, they are going to play queen e4 check. And this is when you can sidestep your king, threatening to pin black's queen to the king. This is why they always play bishop e7, and this is when you can surprise them with bishop takes. The point is, if king takes, now you go knight g5 check, winning the queen. That was the Steiner variation involving queen f4 check back on move 4. But hey, instead of playing queen a4 check on move 4, do you know that you have an option of playing queen b3 right away? This is the mainline orthoschnap gambit, and you will see some great ideas as well. So let's begin with this. Queen b3, the orthoschnap gambit. Noticing that you are attacking this pawn twice, black will usually take on e4. And now the idea is to develop or involve the light squad bishop into the game, double attacking the f7 pawn. Some of your amateur opponents will try to defend the f7 pawn like this with knight h6. But the best you can do here is to play pawn to d3. Always. Why not pawn to d4? See, someday you would love to develop your knight on f3, but black's pawn on e4 is an obstruction, so you want to play d3 and threaten to take it on the next move so that you can freely develop your knight. What this also does is it paves the way for your dark squad bishop. You want to eliminate the defender of the f7 pawn. For example, if ed happens, you can safely go bishop takes, and after gh, who knows, this may even lead to mating too, like checkmate. Now check this out, you guys. If you want to learn more about these kinds of tricks or similar opening ideas like the ones I just shared, you can watch this video that has popped up on the top left. Another video that I highly recommend you check out to skyrocket your rating is this one that has popped up on the top right. But if you love Gambit videos, you can check out the video that has popped up on the bottom left. And if you are a lover of chess traps like myself, feel free to click on the video that has popped up on the bottom right.